Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Kari's Confessions, a nonprofit exec tells all, the show where nonprofit leaders, change makers, and board members come to level up their skills and their impact. I'm your host, Kari Anderson, principal with Incite Consulting. I spent 25 years in the nonprofit sector in leadership roles with 7 organizations. Now, I provide coaching and consulting services to ensure that nonprofits, like yours, have the structure, systems, and practices to do your best work. Wherever I go, I continue to hear that nonprofit execs need a space to gather, to receive tools, feedback, and advice that encourages them to stay the course. It doesn't matter if you're in a village of 182 or in a metropolis of millions, nonprofit work is both gratifying and lonely. I'm here to make sure that you breathe, laugh, smirk, and get excited again about the important work that you do. Today's episode is one I'm super excited about. For those that have worked with me, you know this is my living, breathing work, debunking myths about nonprofit board service. Whether you are a new nonprofit board director, an experienced one, or an executive director working closely with your board, this episode will give you a fresh perspective and some practical strategies to strengthen your leadership team. So there's lots we're going to cover today, but if I were going to pick my big 3, right? First of all, board service is active, informed, and strategic. Conflict isn't failure, and building a strong board doesn't happen by accident. It happens on purpose. So let's dive right in. So I play a game every time I'm with boards. What are the 10 questions every board director, every board member should be able to answer? Good heavens, I get a laundry list, right? And most of them are not things that are relevant. So here are the basics that I would start with. Every board director, yes, every single one should be able to answer at least these questions about the organization they serve. Things like, what's our mission and vision? Whom do we actually serve and why? What are our top 3 funding sources? What are the biggest risks facing our organization? How do we measure success? If you're thinking, wow, I'm not sure I know all of these, don't worry, you're not alone. But here's the myth we need to bust right away. Board service is not just honorary. It's active, informed leadership, regardless the age of your organization, regardless the size of your organization, regardless of your budget, right? So how the heck do we actually create a more engaged and informed board so they can actually answer those questions, right? An engaged board doesn't just show up to meetings. They advocate, fundraise, and strategize alongside staff. And they have to do all of those things if there is or isn't staff, right? The level of it just changes. So what are some easy ways to boost engagement on your board? Share regular impact updates. Lots of board directors are told, we need you to do this and this and this and raise money for this and handle the budget here, but we're not sharing with them how those actions are actually impacting your organization. Invite board members to participate in programs and events, right? That's how they can actually start to see mission in action. Offer quick trainings during board meetings. I can't tell you how many times I hear, well, we don't have time for that training, right? Or, oh my heavens, a board retreat, right? Or what do you mean strategic planning? I just signed on to attend board meetings. No, right? There's more, but how we can start to meet them in the middle is making sure we've got quick trainings on how we do our work and what their job is during board meetings. Because here's the truth, right? Good board members don't hide in the background. They roll up their sleeves and get involved. Our job is to give them the tools that they need in order for them to start rolling up their sleeves. So something else, right, that I think just when we don't have to address it anymore, it pops this little head up. And it is, hey, now that we know that we need a strategic plan, who actually is involved in that planning work? I just heard a horror story the other day about a strategic planning committee of the board. And when I dug in further, they said, well, yeah, these 2 board directors and the staff created the plan. And the hair stood up on the back of my neck. That doesn't help the entire board become engaged. And that sure doesn't lead to any sort of board accountability, right? Strategic planning is a team sport, right? It's not just the staff's job. And it's certainly not just the board staff or board job. It is everyone's job. So board directors play a critical role in setting the long-term vision for your organization and making sure the organization stays aligned with the mission. they're not involved necessarily in writing the entire plan, but they must be involved in the ideation and setting strategic priorities, because that helps everyone be accountable to where you're going as a business, right? Their voice and leadership are essential, and it's everyone's job, right? So we cannot marginalize, we can't exclude. It's not just a committee of two people, it is everyone's job to be involved in this process. When you think about the board and you're thinking about setting the stage for engagement and accountability, oftentimes we've got challenging dynamics in terms of personalities and people on the board, right? We live and breathe in businesses that require people to actually move our missions forward. But not every board meeting is rainbows and smooth sailing. Same thing with committee meetings, right? Conflict happens. Different opinions happen. And that's actually a really good thing at your business if it's managed well. Clear roles, honest conversations, and sometimes a neutral third party facilitator can help turn tensions into productive dialogue. Conflict doesn't mean failure, right? Conflict often means that people care deeply and need additional information to be able to move from conflict to some resolution. So when we're thinking about board engagement, again, this is a recurring theme here. Here are some fast engagement boosts for you to consider with your organization. I think back to when I was in the field, and I would just rail on board members for all of the things they weren't doing. And I forgot to do something that's critical for board engagement: celebrating wins, right? Even the small ones. Your board directors are volunteers. That is not an excuse, right? But this is not their day job. And we need to make sure, just like with staff, that we're talking about things that are going well and celebrating successes. People generally like to be involved with successes, and they'll come back and do more, right? So our job is to celebrate those wins. We also need to make sure that each board director has clear and meaningful roles. So that might look like you going back to your job description for the board and freshening that. Also making sure that in addition to a board job description, that there is an annual board agreement that is signed that provides clarity as to what the heck we're supposed to be doing, right? Oftentimes in exit interviews that I'll take on with board directors, one of their biggest frustrations is not understanding what it is they were supposed to be doing as a board director, right? Lots of ambiguity means for lots of overwhelm, and it was easy for them to kind of ghost, right? Or become anonymous on the board. So having clear, meaningful roles is super important. Making sure that board meetings are efficient and purposeful, right? Board meetings, hear me people, are not report readouts, right? Those you can send via email, right? In the olden days, we sent them via mail. This is a time for dialogue, for discussion, for debate, sometimes for disagreement, right? And so it is our job to craft board meeting agendas to make sure that there's efficiency and purpose behind those meetings. Make sure that board members have opportunities to connect socially, right? There's case studies and research that show that the better board members know each other, right? Genuinely knowing, liking, trusting. It's built via rapport and social engagements. It's a lot easier to actually get down to brass tacks when it comes to making harder decisions at board meetings. The opportunity to be asking for feedback regularly and acting on that feedback, right? Because here's the Mythbuster moment. Board members won't automatically stay motivated. We actually have to nurture that motivation. So when we're thinking about your board, right, and those board members who have finally said, yes, I want to join, what are some things that every new board member, frankly, all board members need to know? So if you're responsible for onboarding board members, executive directors, this is not your job, by the way, right? This is your governance or board development committee's job. These are things that they should be paying attention to. Your new board directors need more than just a welcome letter, right? We don't just give them the board manual and say, hey, good luck, welcome to the team. They need clarity on their legal and financial responsibilities, expectations for fundraising and advocacy at your organization, the organization's mission, finances, and major programs. Don't just assume they'll figure it out. At best, right, they'll show up at your meetings. At worst, we've lost time with them. Potentially their first year second year, or they'll just kind of gradually drift away, right? Great board members are made and not born, and onboarding is where that starts. So we've talked a little bit about board engagement. We've talked about the importance of ensuring board directors know what they're supposed to be doing, the things they're responsible for, what your organization does. Well, now there's something that we call a board retreat. And oftentimes I will hear board members, board leadership saying, well, we're asking people to come to these board meetings. We can't possibly ask for anything else. Oh, yes, you can. And yes, you should, right? So this oftentimes starts with board recruitment and what's in that board job description or that annual board agreement. A board retreat is also part of a board responsibility. And so if we're thinking about hosting one, the answer is yes, right? That's an annual thing. And there are some key pieces to make it different and meaningful, right? A board retreat is not a board meeting. There's not 17 agenda items, nor should there, by the way, be at a board meeting either, right? The board retreat has purpose. And typically, right, I have 3 ingredients that go into a board retreat. One, there's social time, right? This is truly an opportunity for board directors to be engaging differently with each other, right? 2, there's education time. And every year, there's an opportunity to educate differently based on the needs of the board, right? It could be advocacy, it could be board governance, it could be overarching financial issues that the organization has. And the third ingredient is planning, right? Setting big goals for the board this coming year. So when you're planning a retreat, and again, executive director, this is not your job. This is a board retreat, should be planned by the governance committee. If you don't have a governance committee or board development committee, it often falls to your executive committee. So set clear goals, right? Bring in the facilitator. Again, work I do, work that others do. Balance the serious work with that time to connect informally. Retreats are not just nice extras, right? They are essential opportunities to reset, refocus, and reconnect. The entity who's responsible for setting the strategic direction for your organization, for legal and financial oversight, for serving as a fiduciary, for managing risk for your organization, and supporting you as the executive director. So as a part, oftentimes of coming out of board retreats, we talk about board development, right? And what might work, right? If board recruitment for your organization is feeling random or rushed, or that you as the executive director are having to do it by yourself, and again, that's not your job, you're not alone in this, right? So we want to reformulate how board recruitment is done, because if we're thinking about recruitment differently, board engagement looks different. The best boards are built intentionally, and it is a team sport, right? Just like board work and setting the strategic direction of the organization. So when we're thinking about how we develop that board, a strong plan includes a skills and diversity gap analysis. Oftentimes we work off of a board matrix to be able to identify those. A clear recruitment strategy. Most board directors and members that I work with say, hey, I recognize that it is my job to be recruiting board directors, but I don't know what we need, right? And this isn't about someone's job title or the industry they work in, right? It is also, and frankly, more important on what skill sets are currently around the board table and what skill sets we do not have. Do we have industry, right? Do we have geographic areas? Do we have socioeconomic members that need to be on our board to really mirror life experience and get us to where we're going based on our strategic plan? We need to make sure part of board development includes regular training and leadership succession planning, right? Oftentimes we get better in terms of board development of making sure that there's a legitimate board orientation, that there's additional professional development opportunities that are offered to board directors, but we still aren't doing our best work in helping board directors understand that there are officer positions that are required on the board, and that any board director is eligible to run for one of those offices. But what are we doing to set them up for success and make those positions both interesting and doable, right? There's a myth out there that, again, great boards happen naturally. No, they don't. Great boards take work, and it's a team sport in making sure that those boards are developed. Building a high impact board takes planning, intention, and care, regardless of where you are in terms of age of organization or your life cycle of business. So that's a wrap for today's myth busting session, if you will. I think the most important takeaways: board service is active, informed, and strategic. Conflict isn't failure. And building a strong board doesn't happen by accident, it happens on purpose. If you found today's episode helpful, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a fellow nonprofit leader. Make sure to follow me on your favorite streaming platforms, including YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Many of you may know that I'm no longer on Facebook or Instagram. I'm only using online platforms that work for me. TikTok is not in my jam yet, right? So for additional resources and tools, follow me on LinkedIn. You can also check out my website at inciteconsultinggroup.com. Thanks for tuning in to Kari's Confessions, a nonprofit exec tells all. Let's keep building better boards and bigger impact together. Have a great week.